Welcome to our deep dive, and today we're going like right back to the Middle Ages.
Ooh, exciting.
Yeah, we're going to explore these things called sophisms, which I guess are like these...
Logic puzzles.
Yeah, exactly, these logic puzzles meant to challenge even like the smartest philosophers.
Yeah, and they were super popular in the 13th century.
Wow, that's a long time ago.
It is, and it's interesting because, sophisms, they weren't just like brain teasers. They
They
actually...
weren't just fun and games.
No, they were important. They helped develop logical thinking and philosophical debate.
Ah, so they were kind of serious business.
Yeah, exactly. And speaking of serious, our guide through this crazy world of sophisms is a bit of a mystery himself.
Ooh, a mystery man. I love a good mystery.
Right. This guy, Richard the Sophister,
Richard the Sophister. I like the sound of that.
he was a 13th century logician, and he compiled over
300?
300 of these like head-scratching sophisms.
That's dedication.
I know, right? Anyway, he put them all in a book called Abstractions, and it was a pretty influential text.
Wow, 300 logic puzzles. That's a lot to think about. But who is this Richard guy anyway?
Well, that's the mystery.
I knew there was a mystery.
Scholars think he was probably one of two big names at Oxford back then, either Richard Fishacre or Richard Rufus.
So we've got a Richard Fishacre and a Richard Rufus, huh? This could be tricky.
Right, but even today, we're not 100% sure which Richard is our puzzle master.
A true medieval mystery. Okay, well, let's maybe leave the history mystery for a bit and dive into these logic puzzles.
Sounds good to me.
What kind of wild stuff did Richard come up with?
Okay, are you ready for this? He's got gems like every man is every man.
Wait, what? How can that be?
I know, right? And it gets weirder. He also has whatever exists or does not exist exists.
Okay, now that one just sounds like word salad to me.
And then there's, get this, the whole Socrates is less than Socrates.
Now hold on a minute. How can something be less than itself? My brain already hurts.
I told you these sophisms are mind-bendy. They use language in a way that seems logical.
But really, it's just twisting our brains.
Exactly. They play with ambiguities, wordplay, all that to really make you stop and think, wait, what?
So they were basically messing with their students' minds.
Kinda, yeah. But in a good way. It was all about making them really think critically.
Okay, I guess I can see that. But how did they, actually approach these puzzles? Did Richard just throw them out there and let the students drown in confusion?
Nah, he was way more organized than that. For each sophism, he would, present arguments both for and against it.
So he'd build up a case and then tear it down.
Pretty much.
And then I guess he would reveal the trick.
Exactly. Imagine yourself back in a medieval classroom.
Okay, I'm there, sitting on a hard wooden bench.
Right. And Richard is laying out all these arguments, making you see both sides.
My head's spinning.
And then finally, he reveals the fallacy, the flaw in the logic.
Oh, that must have been satisfying after all that mental gymnastics.
It was a clever way to teach logic, for sure.
It sounds kind of fun, actually. Maybe we should try one. What do you think?
Let's do it. How about we start with every man is every man?
All right. Every man is every man. It sounds so simple, but I bet there's a catch.
Oh, you better believe there's a catch.
Okay, let's hear it.
So the proof goes like this. This man is this man, that man is that man, and so on for every man, therefore every man is every man. It kind of makes sense, right?
If you just think about it quickly, yeah. But I'm sure there's more to it.
Oh, there's definitely more. Richard then throws in this counter-argument, the disproof. This is true. Some man is not every man, and also no man is every man. Therefore, it is false that every man is every man.
Okay, my head is officially spinning. So we've got two arguments, and they completely contradict each other.
It's like a logical tug of war. How can both be true?
Exactly. So how do we get out of this mess? I'm guessing this is where Richard steps in to save the day.
You got it. Richard would then point out that the problem is with the word every. It has two different meanings in the sophism.
Ah, so it's all about the word every.
Exactly. Sometimes it means each individual man, and sometimes it means all men as a group.
So the word is shape-shifting. It's like a linguistic chameleon, changing its meaning to trick us.
It's a classic case of what we call equivocation.
Equivocation. Okay, I'm going to remember that one. It sounds like a useful concept, especially when you're dealing with tricky arguments.
It is, and it's a great example of how Richard used these sophisms to really dissect language.
To make us think about the words we use and how they can be twisted, even if it seems like we're being logical.
Exactly, and it's not just about words, it's about the assumptions we make, the things we don't even realize we're assuming.
So these sophisms are like a mental workout, forcing us to question everything.
They really are. But I'm wondering, how did all of this fit into the bigger picture of medieval philosophy? Were sophisms just like brain games, or were they doing something more?
Yeah, that's a great question. Were they just for fun, or were they actually changing how people thought about the world?
That's what we need to explore next.
It's funny. I was thinking about these sophisms and like how they feel kind of old-fashioned.
Yeah.
But then at the same time, I was like, wait a minute. They're all about, like, language and truth and...
And reality.
Exactly, and those are totally things we're still dealing with today.
Oh, absolutely. Richard and his logician buddies were wrestling with questions that are just as relevant now. Like, how do we even know what's true?
It's like, especially now with, like, the internet and all the information coming at us from everywhere.
It's overwhelming.
Seriously, everyone's trying to convince us of something, right? It's like politicians, advertisers, even like, your friends on social media.
It's hard to know what to believe.
It really is. It feels like being able to tell what's true is more important than ever.
And that's where these medieval sophisms can help us.
Seriously.
Yeah, they trade us to think more carefully, to spot those sneaky ways language can be used to, like, mislead us.
So you're saying these old logic puzzles can make us better thinkers in the 21st century. That's kind of wild.
It might seem weird, but think about the fallacies that Richard was talking about in the Abstractionies.
Right, like the equivocation thing we just talked about with the word every.
Exactly, but there are others too, like accident composition and division, consequent, absolute, and qualified senses.
Wow, that's a mouthful.
I know, right? But the point is, these fallacies aren't just stuck in some medieval book.
They're still around today.
Oh yeah, they're everywhere. You hear them in conversations, you see them in news articles, political speeches, ads.
Once you start noticing them, you can't stop seeing them, huh?
It's like you've unlocked some secret code to the universe.
Okay, I'm intrigued. Give me an example. How would one of these medieval fallacies show up in our modern world?
All right, let's take the fallacy of composition.
Composition, okay.
This is where someone assumes that what's true for a part of something is also true for the whole thing.
Okay, I think I get it. Give me an example.
Like, imagine someone saying, every player on this basketball team is amazing, so the team must be unbeatable.
Right, but just because you have a bunch of great players doesn't mean they'll automatically work well together.
Exactly. Or think about the fallacy of the consequent, where people mix up correlation and causation.
Correlation and causation, okay.
Yeah, like you might see a headline that says, people who eat chocolate are happier.
So I just eat chocolate all the time.
Not so fast. There could be other reasons why those people are happier. Maybe they have more free time or better relationships. You can't just assume chocolate is the magic happiness ingredient.
Ah, so these fallacies can really trick us if we're not careful.
That's right, and that's why Richard and his sophisms are so valuable. They teach us to recognize these tricks and become more critical thinkers.
So it's like Richard is our logic coach, training us to spot bad arguments and think clearly.
Exactly. But Richard wasn't just about finding errors. He was building on a whole tradition of logic that went back to Aristotle.
So he wasn't just playing around, he was really getting at something deep.
Absolutely. His sophisms were a way to explore the very foundations of logic, like what makes an argument valid, how important clear definitions are, and how to spot those hidden assumptions we all make.
So even though the specific puzzles might feel kind of old, the ideas behind them are still super important.
Totally. These principles are essential for anything that involves critical thinking, philosophy, law, science, even just making decisions in your daily life.
It's amazing how these medieval logic puzzles connect to so many things.
Right. And we haven't even talked about Richard's impact on the world. His book Abstractionies was used as a textbook. Did his ideas spread beyond the classroom? Did they shape the way people thought about logic?
Yeah, I'm curious about that too. Did his work make a difference in the long run?
That's what we're going to explore next.
Okay, so we've spent all this time talking about Richard the Sophister and his crazy logic puzzles.
Right, those sophisms.
And we know his book, The Abstractionies, was like a textbook.
Yeah, it was popular.
But did it actually, like, influence anyone else?
Oh, absolutely. Richard wasn't just some guy in a room by himself.
He wasn't working in a vacuum.
Exactly. He was part of this, like, lively intellectual community.
Cool.
And his work, especially the Abstractionies, was like, shared and copied, and other scholars were talking about it for decades.
Wow, that's pretty impressive for a book about logic puzzles.
Right. It really struck a chord with people.
I wonder why that was.
Well, I think part of it was, just how clever and different all those sophisms were.
They weren't just the same old stuff.
No, Richard was coming up with new and even more complicated puzzles, ones that really made people think harder.
So he was like a logic puzzle innovator.
He was pushing the boundaries of logic, for sure.
So he was always challenging his readers to, like, level up their thinking skills.
Exactly. But I also think it was more than just the puzzles themselves.
There was something else going on.
I think so. You see, back then in medieval universities, there was this, like, renewed interest in all these ancient philosophers.
It's like Aristotle and folks like that.
Yeah, exactly. And logic was seen as, like, the key to understanding these guys and getting into those big philosophical debates.
So Richard's work, with all its focus on logic and analysis, it fit right in with what people were already interested in.
Absolutely. It was the perfect book at the perfect time. And the sophisms themselves, well, they were seen as this great way to practice arguing.
Because debating was like a big deal in medieval universities, right?
It was everything. It wasn't just about finding the right answer. It was about defending your ideas, thinking of counter-arguments and spotting the weaknesses in what the other guy was saying.
That sounds intense.
Oh, it was, but also really exciting. It was like a mental sparring match.
So Richard's work was basically training students to be expert debaters.
In a way, yes. And that had a lasting impact on how logic and philosophy were taught.
So did Richard's work have any influence beyond the classroom?
Oh, definitely. We still have texts that came after Richard's, and later logicians were still mentioning him and his ideas.
So his work really did make a difference.
It did. His approach to sophisms helped to solidify the idea that logic was like a fundamental subject.
Like a cornerstone of education.
Exactly. And it contributed to this whole tradition of logical analysis and argumentation that went on to influence philosophy for centuries.
It's kind of mind-blowing to think about how these logic puzzles could have such a huge impact.
Right. It shows how even the smallest things can have a ripple effect and change the world.
So what's the big takeaway for our listeners, especially those who are into philosophy after this deep dive into the world of Richard the Sophister?
I think one of the most important things to remember is just how crucial language is.
Words matter.
They really do. Richard's sophisms show how even little changes in meaning or ambiguous words can mess up your whole argument.
Yeah, I'm starting to see that.
Language is powerful, but you got to be careful with it.
It's like a double-edged sword.
Exactly. Any final thoughts to leave our listeners pondering?
Ooh, I like a good cliffhanger.
I would just say, approach the world with a bit of skepticism, question everything, look for those hidden meanings, and don't buy into arguments that seem too perfect.
Be a critical thinker.
Yes, exactly. In a world with so much information out there, that's more important than ever.
Well said. A huge thank you to our expert for this amazing journey into the world of medieval logic. And to our listeners, thanks for joining us on this deep dive. We hope you've learned something new and maybe even been inspired to explore the world of sophisms for yourselves.
There's a whole world of logical puzzles out there just waiting to be discovered.
And who knows, maybe you'll even uncover some hidden truths about yourself and the world around you in the process. Until next time, happy puzzling.